So Rosin delivered results in a kind of anti-democratic way that was also, in a way, very democratic to the people who were in on it. What I mean is, if you're a Republican or any kind of non-democratic voter, they got nothing for you. But if you buy in, well then, Rosin and the whole democratic machine was there for you. And the ward leaders had significant autonomy in figuring out how to deliver results for their ward. You know, he sort of lets them be their own kind of manager. And the ward leaders then picked the candidates for office and told Rosin who the candidates were be, and then he makes sure they get put on the ballot, and then obviously they get elected because the Democrats deliver in each ward. So the whole thing is just like anti-democratic and riddled with corruption. The attitude from the Democrats controlling the city was that taxes always had to be low in order to attract businesses to the city. So the city routinely passed budgets that they then could not fund. And they knew it when they did it. It's like it's politically popular to say there's going to be a lot of money for the fire department, but they know there's no money for the fire department. And so city services were consistently terrible. The sewage and the pollutants from the factories dumped into the water supply. The water, the municipal city water, made visitors sick. People who lived in Baltimore full time got their immune system used to the contaminated water and did a little better, but visitors were like, "Oh no, don't drink that water." The safety laws were unenforced. The building codes were unenforced. What's that? You want to build your building not up to code? Just pay off some Democratic official, and then you don't have to worry about it. The fire department was underfunded. The fire department, remember now there's a municipal fire department, they kept warning that one day there was going to be a disastrous fire that the Baltimore Fire Department was not going to be able to stop. They're like, our equipment is old, our department is underfunded, and I know you think it's fine, but one day there's going to be a disaster and the city's not going to be ready. And you know, the Democratic machine is like, yeah, negative Nellies. So, Gorman and Rosin managing the mechanics, Gorman the sort of front man, they maneuver to get Odin Bowie out of office. They didn't like Odin Bowie. My impression is that they didn't think he was sympathetic enough to their political plans. So they get Odin Bowie ousted. I think Bowie was cool with this because he had gotten his railroad line. And the next Maryland governor was William Pinckney White, who you may vaguely remember because you've got an amazing memory. He was part of that contested election back during the 1850s, during the Know-Nothing corruption. Now, rocking that incredible mustache, William Pinckney White, approved by Gorman and Rosin, and becomes the next Maryland governor. White, side note, the grandson of William Pinckney, who remember you met back in the early 1800s. This is a great example of how all this corruption works. So, Rosin and Gorman get White the governorship, and then as governor, White names Gorman as president of the C&O. The C&O had been in decline since the Civil War. But because the state was so invested in the CNO was a great kind of political patronage tool. So you could pay off your supporters by giving them cush jobs at the CNO. And now Gorman was in charge of that architecture, while also continuing as Speaker of the House of Delegates. Don't worry, no conflict of interest here. He then went on to the Maryland Senate in 1875, that is, Gorman, not White. So Gorman goes from the House of Delegates to the Maryland Senate, and by that time, William Pinckney White had gone from governor to U.S. Senate, and they let White have one term in the U.S. Senate, but then Gorman became the next U.S. Senator. So 1880, after William Pinckney White had one term in the Senate, the Maryland General Assembly sent Arthur Pugh Gorman as the next Maryland Senator. Remember, by the way, that senators continue to be appointed by the state legislatures. It's been this way ever since the country started. There still is no popular election for senators. There were people around the country who were noticing that this made politics really open to corruption, as in the case of Arthur Pugh Gorman. So Gorman heads off to the U.S. Senate and now gets really concerned with trying to figure out how to maneuver to get himself to be the Democratic nominee for president in one of the upcoming elections. During this period, so the years we've just raced through here, in 1875, Baltimore opened its new city hall. Excuse me. This was the one that had been in construction for years, and now it was ready and opened 1875. It was a massive, expensive-looking, fancy building that was designed to show off Baltimore's wealth and power. Remember, this is one of the 2 or 3 most important cities in the entire country at this point. So it's here, 1875, when the Baltimore City Hall finally left the old Peel Museum building, where it had been for all those years. Now, properly housed in this extravagant building, the whole city is run by corruption. And I don't think entirely coincidentally, the elections later that year, so the 1875 Baltimore citywide elections, were in many ways like the coming out party for the Gorman-Rosin machine's violence. Like up until this point, there's a lot of walking around money and favors and, hey, can we buy you something for your family? But this election, the negative side of that amped up by several degrees. So, part of it is you want to get your supporters, or not just your supporters, but anybody who will vote for the Democrats, turned out and voting. The flip side is you want the people who will vote the other way to stay home. And by many accounts, the Baltimore 1875 elections were the most violent since back in the know-nothing heyday of the 1850s. The symbol for the Democratic Party was a rooster. The donkey hadn't arrived yet as the symbol. And so, rooster to the front. In states further south, they would soon start emblazoning the words white supremacy on the rooster's chest in these emblems. But here in Maryland, we just got the rooster. So, as you might guess, the Democrats win the mayorship, the city council. You can see the headline over here from a Republican newspaper. The newly elected mayor knows perfectly well that he is no more honestly the mayor-elect of Baltimore than he is the emperor of China. He owes his success to an audacious and despicable system of swindling. Now, the Democrats, for their part, said, these Republicans, they love to exaggerate. That's what the Democratic newspaper over here is going on about. They're like, this was nothing like the know-nothings. There were no pollywogs, no blood tubs, no black snakes, no plug uglies. Come on, get out of here. Just as bad as the 1850s. And they do this kind of thing. Were there some disturbances on Election Day? Well, of course there were. It's a big city. Stuff's gonna happen. The governor who came into office through the elections that fall was John Lee Carroll, a descendant of your favorite, Morgan, Charles Carroll of Carrollton. And Carroll became the Maryland governor, and Ferdinand Latrobe became the Baltimore mayor. Latrobe and Carroll were both, in many ways, figureheads. Like, yeah, they hold the actual offices. John Lee Carroll is governor. Latrobe is mayor of Baltimore. But in boss politics like this, they don't ultimately call the shots. They got to go talk to Gorman and Rosin before any big decision. The excerpt you see here is from an account of the corruption in the 1875 elections, and this investigation talks about how the Democrats stuffed the ballot boxes with ballots that no voter had used, and they didn't even bother to make the votes look like they had been used. They just took whole stacks of paper and put it in the ballot box on top of each other. Sure. So John Lee Carroll, the new governor, and your boy Ferdinand Latrobe, the new mayor. I have not been able to ascertain for sure whether or not mayors were not allowed to serve consecutive terms. But you can see that Latrobe basically takes a term off and then a term on. The way that I'd like you to think of it is that he was mayor of Baltimore for most of 20 years, starting in 1875. Right? So 1875, he wins, and then, for most of the next 20 years, he's the mayor of Baltimore. Do the voters love him? Well, it kind of doesn't matter, because we've got a system now to work around what the voters really want. Do we need to spend a little more walking around money? Do we need to use a little more violence against the Republicans? We can do that. So, while the Democratic machine, controlled by Gorman and Rosin, was getting its way, Black Marylanders, particularly in, the center of Black Maryland life, which is Baltimore, they were getting organized themselves. It didn't stop with creating the Frederick Douglass Institute and marching for the 15th Amendment parade. There was lots of institutional organization that had to be done. And Harvey Johnson was the most important black leader in Baltimore in the 1870s and 80s. He, I think, and this is debatable, but I'm going to argue that he gets replaced in that category by Harry Scythe Cummings by the 1890s. But as I've worked on this, I've gone back and forth on whether Harry Scythe Cummings should have been the key term, or whether it should, in fact, have been the guy that we're about to spend a little time with, Harvey Johnson. I know at this point you're all fired up and you're like, man, give me some Harvey Johnson details. And I'm like, no. You got to wait till the next video. That's how I do it. I'm cold.